The massive space station called Nexus Prime hung in the void like a crystal flower made of metal and light. Captain Jake Morrison stared at it through the viewing window of his ship, Terra's Pride. He had seen many amazing things since leaving Earth, but this was different. This was the heart of the Galactic Confederation, home to almost 1,000 different alien species. "First time seeing the capital, Captain?" asked Dr. Lisa Carter, the ship's lead scientist. She stood beside him, her tablet full of notes about human mythology and folklore. Lisa had spent years studying Earth's legends and myths. She believed they held important truths about humanity's past. "Yeah," Jake replied. "Hard to believe we're really here. 6 months ago we thought we were alone in the universe." The journey to Nexus Prime had taken 3 weeks. During that time, Jake had read everything he could about the Confederation. It was old, older than human civilization. Some of the founding species had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. Ben Foster, the ship's head of security, joined them at the window. The former Navy SEAL looked uncomfortable in his dress uniform. "Something feels off about this place," he said quietly. "Too quiet. Too controlled." "You're just nervous," Lisa said with a smile. "We're about to become part of something incredible. Think about it. Nearly 1,000 species working together in peace." Jake wasn't so sure. The messages they had received from the Confederation had been polite but cold. The aliens seemed to view humanity as children who needed guidance. It reminded him of how adults talk to kids at a school science fair. Their ship docked at a loading bay designed for new species. A delegation of aliens waited for them. Jake recognized some of the species from the files he had studied. There was Elder Zephyrian Kolthak from the Vorthan Empire, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. Next to him stood Ambassador Quextel of the Nexari, whose body looked like it was made of living crystal. A reptilian Sauroch delegate completed the group, its scales shifting color as it moved. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," said Elder Kolthak in perfect English. His voice had a musical quality that made Jake think of wind chimes. "We are pleased to welcome humanity to the Confederation." The tour that followed was impressive. Nexus Prime was a marvel of engineering and cooperation. Beings from dozens of worlds worked side by side in laboratories, offices, and workshops. The technology was centuries ahead of anything on Earth. But Jake noticed something troubling. Despite the impressive displays, there was a sameness to everything. The technology, while advanced, seemed limited in specific ways. No one species seemed to have weapons or tools that were dramatically better than any other. It was as if someone had set a ceiling on how advanced anyone could become. The formal welcome ceremony took place in the Great Hall, a massive chamber that could hold representatives from every member species. Jake and his team were given seats in a section marked for junior members. The term stung, but he kept his expression neutral. Elder Kolthak gave a speech about unity and cooperation. Then he invited the human delegation to share something about their culture. Lisa had been preparing for this moment for weeks. She stood and activated a holographic display. Images of dragons, phoenixes, and other mythical creatures filled the air above the audience. "These are some of humanity's most treasured myths and legends," she began. "We have stories of dragons that could breathe fire and fly through the skies. We tell tales of phoenixes that could rise from their own ashes. Our folklore speaks of humans with incredible abilities, shapeshifters, people who could move objects with their minds, warriors who could fight entire armies alone." A sound filled the hall that Jake had never heard before. It took him a moment to realize what it was. Laughter. Not the gentle amusement of beings enjoying a good story, but the kind of laughter adults made when children said something silly. Ambassador Quextal's crystal body chimed like broken bells. "How charming," the alien said. "Every species goes through this phase. You will learn to put aside such childish stories as you mature," the Sauroch delegate hissed with what Jake assumed was amusement. "Humans will understand the real universe soon enough. There are no magical creatures here, only the laws of physics and the harsh reality of survival." Elder Kolthak smiled kindly, which somehow made it worse. "Do not feel embarrassed. The Nexari once believed their crystal caves were alive. The Sarok thought their warrior gods would protect them from any enemy. We all grow beyond our primitive myths. Lisa's face turned red, but she continued her presentation. She showed more images. Ancient human art depicting impossible feats, stories of heroes who seemed to bend reality around them. The alien audience continued to chuckle and whisper among themselves. After the ceremony, the human delegation was taken to a briefing room. Elder Kolthak displayed a series of grainy video recordings. "Since you seem interested in myths," he said, "perhaps you would enjoy seeing some of our historical curiosities." The videos were old and blurry, but they showed creatures that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. Something that looked remarkably like a dragon soared through an alien sky before the recording cut out. Another video showed a bird-like creature bursting into flames, only to emerge unharmed from the fire. These recordings date back thousands of years, Kolthak explained. They show the last of the so-called mythical species that once lived in our galaxy. They are all extinct now, of course. Such creatures could not survive in the real universe. Ben leaned forward. "What happened to them?" The alien's expression grew serious. "The same thing that happens to all species that refuse to accept reality. They were consumed by their own fantasies until they could no longer adapt to survive." After the briefing, the humans were given their first assignment. They would explore dead worlds in the Outer Rim, cataloging any remaining technology or resources. It was clearly busy work, the kind of job given to new members to keep them occupied. That night, in their assigned quarters, Jake's team gathered to discuss what they had experienced. Lisa was still upset about the reception her presentation had received. "They treated our entire cultural heritage like a joke," she said. "Maybe that's the point," Ben replied. He had been reviewing the video recordings on his tablet. "Did you notice how familiar those extinct creatures looked? I swear that dragon could have come straight out of a medieval painting." Jake nodded. "I noticed that too. And did anyone else think it was strange how quickly they dismissed our myths while showing us videos of the exact same creatures?" "You think there's a connection?" Lisa asked. "I don't know," Jake said. "But I think our first mission might be more important than they're letting on." As Terra's pride prepared to depart for the Outer Rim, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the Galactic Confederation was hiding something important. The laughter of the alien delegates still echoed in his mind, but now it sounded less like amusement and more like nervousness. Something told him that humanity's myths might not be as fictional as everyone believed. 3 months had passed since Terra's pride left Nexus Prime. The Outer Rim was a lonely place, filled with dead worlds and empty space. Jake Morrison's crew had cataloged 17 lifeless planets, finding nothing but dust and broken stones. The work was boring, but it gave them time to think about what they had seen at the Confederation capital. Dr. Lisa Carter had not given up on her research into human myths. She spent her free time comparing Earth's legends with the alien video recordings they had been shown. The similarities were too strong to ignore. Every culture on Earth had stories about dragons, but the creature in the ancient alien video looked exactly like the dragons in Chinese artwork. "Captain," Lisa called from the science station, "I'm getting some unusual readings from the planet below." Jake looked at the display screen. Kythera 7 was supposed to be completely dead. The Confederation file said nothing had lived there for thousands of years, but Lisa's scanners were showing massive life signatures deep underground. "That can't be right," said Alex Parker, their pilot. She was young but skilled, with an intuition for flying that impressed even veteran spacers. "The atmospheric readings show the surface is toxic. Nothing could survive down there." Ben Foster checked his security readings. "The signatures are big, whatever they are, and they're moving in patterns. That suggests intelligence." Jake made a decision that would change everything. "Take us down. We need to investigate this." Alex guided Terra's pride through the poisonous atmosphere to a landing site near a massive cave system. The away team consisted of Jake, Lisa, Ben, and Tony Garcia, their chief mechanic. Tony was a practical man who could fix anything, but he had been acting strangely lately. Sometimes his tools seemed to respond to his thoughts before he even picked them up. The caves were enormous, carved from some kind of crystal that glowed with its own light. The tunnels went deeper than their scanners could measure. As they descended, the air grew warmer and cleaner, as if something was purifying it. "This doesn't make sense," Lisa whispered. "How can the air be breathable down here when the surface is toxic?" They had their answer when they reached the main cavern. It was larger than a football stadium, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness, and it was not empty. The creature that rose to meet them was beautiful and terrible. It was easily 50 feet long, with scales that shifted between gold and deep red. Massive wings folded against its sides, and its eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably ancient. When it opened its mouth, Jake expected fire, but instead heard a voice that spoke directly into their minds. "Humans," the dragon said, and its mental voice carried wonder and something that might have been hope. "After so long, humans have come to the deep places." Lisa stepped forward, her scientific training warring with amazement. "You're speaking to us telepathically. How is that possible? The same way your ancestors spoke to mine, child of Earth. The same way your kind once walked among the stars, before the great silence fell." Ben kept his hand near his weapon, but the dragon made no threatening moves. "Great silence? What are you talking about?" The dragon's massive head turned toward him. "You do not remember, of course you do not. The memories were buried too deep, hidden too well. But you carry the marks of the old blood. All of you do." More dragons emerged from the shadows of the cavern. There were dozens of them, all ancient, all tired. They moved like beings who had been hiding for a very long time. "We are the last of our kind in this sector," the first dragon continued. "When the silence came, we fled to worlds like this, places where the Watchers would not think to look. We have waited, hoping that one day our old allies would return." "Allies?" Jake asked. "Humans were not always bound to one small world," the dragon explained. "Your species once traveled freely among the stars. You worked alongside dragons, phoenixes, and all the others who possessed the old gifts. Together we built wonders that made the current Confederation look like children playing with toys." Lisa's tablet was recording everything. "If that's true, what happened? Why don't we remember?" The dragon's eyes grew sad. "The great silence. Every few thousand years it sweeps across the galaxy, destroying any civilization that grows too powerful, too different. We who survived learned to hide, to seem smaller than we were. The Confederation exists to maintain that illusion." Tony Garcia had been silent, but now he spoke up. "I keep having dreams," he said. "Dreams where I can shape metal with my hands, where machines listen to me like they're alive. The others probably think I'm crazy." The dragon looked at him with new interest. "Show me your hands, child of the Forge Worlds." Tony held out his hands, and the dragon breathed on them gently. Where the breath touched, Tony's hands began to glow with a soft light. He gasped and stumbled backward, but the glow remained. "Pick up a piece of the cave wall," the dragon instructed. Tony touched a chunk of crystal that had fallen from the ceiling. Under his fingers, the stone began to flow like liquid. Within moments, he had shaped it into a perfect sphere, then a cube, then back to its original form. "This is impossible," Lisa breathed. "No," the dragon said. "This is who you were, meant to be. The power sleeps in all your kind, waiting for the right moment to wake." Alex Parker felt something stirring inside her as well. When she had landed the ship, she had felt unusually connected to its systems. Now, standing in the dragon's presence, that feeling was growing stronger. "Something's happening to me too," she said. "When I fly, sometimes it feels like the ship and I are the same thing." The dragon nodded. "The pilot's gift. Your ancestors could make any vessel respond to their will as if it were part of their own body." Ben was the most skeptical. "Even if this is all true, what does it matter? These powers you're talking about, they're just myths. Stories." "Stories have power," the dragon replied. "More power than the Confederation wants anyone to remember. Your myths are not fantasies, human warrior. They are memories passed down through generations waiting for the day when they would be needed again. The dragon turned to address all of them. The Confederation keeps the galaxy weak on purpose. They limit technology, suppress abilities like yours, and make sure no species grows strong enough to attract the attention of those who bring the silence. Why are you telling us this? Jake asked. Because the signs are appearing again. Long range. Sensors detect movement in the dark spaces between galaxies. The silence stirs once more, and this time, hiding will not be enough. The galaxy needs its myths to become real again. As if summoned by the dragon's words, Jake's communicator crackled to life. It was Rachel White, their communications officer, calling from the ship. "Captain, you need to get back here." Rachel's voice was filled with excitement and fear. "I'm picking up massive energy readings from deep space. And sir, the ship's computer systems are responding to me in ways they never have before. I think something is waking up." The dragon's ancient eyes met Jake's. "It begins again, human captain. The question is, will your species remember who you truly are in time to make a difference?" Jake looked at his team. Tony was still staring at his glowing hands. Alex was practically vibrating with new energy. Lisa was frantically taking notes, trying to process everything they had learned. Ben remained skeptical, but alert. "We need to get back to Nexus Prime," Jake decided. "The Confederation needs to know about this." The dragon's laughter was like the sound of distant thunder. "They already know, human. They have always known. The question is whether they will try to stop you from remembering, or whether they will finally admit the truth they have hidden for so long." As the away team prepared to return to their ship, the dragon called after them. "Captain Morrison, when the time comes, remember that your myths were never lies. They were promises waiting to be kept." Back aboard Terra's Pride, Rachel White was indeed experiencing something extraordinary. The ship's computers were responding to her thoughts, showing her information she had never accessed before. Deep in the ship's memory banks, she found files that shouldn't exist. Star charts marking the locations of other hidden refugees, technical specifications for technologies that seemed to blend science and magic. As Alex piloted them away from Carthera 7, she felt the ship responding to her emotions and intentions in ways that should have been impossible. When she wanted to go faster, the engines seemed to push beyond their rated capacity. When she focused on stealth, the ship's hull seemed to bend light around itself. Jake sent an immediate report to Nexus Prime, but the response was not what he expected. Instead of excitement or interest, the Confederation officials seemed annoyed. They classified the encounter as hallucination syndrome and ordered the human crew to report for immediate psychological evaluation. But Jake Morrison had seen too much to back down now. As Terra's Pride set course for the Confederation capital, he knew they were flying toward a confrontation that would determine not just humanity's place in the galaxy, but the fate of every living being in it. The medical bay on Nexus Prime was sterile and cold. Dr. Lisa Carter sat in an examination chair while alien doctors ran scanners over her head. They were looking for signs of mental illness, convinced that her report about intelligent dragons was a symptom of space madness. "The human brain is still evolving," explained Dr. Veltar, a Nexari physician whose crystal body pulsed with soft light. "Sometimes new space travelers see things that are not there. It is nothing to be ashamed of." Lisa wanted to argue, but Jake had ordered his team to cooperate with the examinations. They needed access to the Confederation's archives, and causing trouble would only get them sent back to Earth. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison was having his own problems. He sat in a conference room facing Elder Kolthak and several other high-ranking officials. Their expressions ranged from concerned to annoyed. "Captain Morrison," Kolthak said in his musical voice, "we understand that deep space exploration can be stressful. Perhaps humanity is not ready for such responsibilities." "My crew is fine," Jake replied firmly. "What we found on Carthera 7 was real. The dragons, the underground city, all of it." Ambassador Quextal's crystal body chimed with what sounded like laughter. "Dragons, Captain? Really? Next you will tell us you have found unicorns and magic wands." Jake kept his temper under control. "I have video recordings, sensor data, physical evidence, which our experts have reviewed," said the Sarok delegate. its scales shifting to a darker color. The recordings show cave formations and reflected light. Your sensors detected underground gas pockets. There is nothing unusual about Kithara 7, but Jake knew they were lying. He had seen the way their expressions changed when they first viewed his evidence. For just a moment, before they composed themselves, he had seen recognition in their eyes. While the official meetings dragged on, Ben Foster was conducting his own investigation. The former Navy SEAL had been given access to the Confederation's historical archives as part of his psychological evaluation. The doctors thought reviewing factual records would help cure him of his mythological delusions. Ben was amazed by what he found. The archives went back 50,000 years, covering the rise and fall of hundreds of civilizations. But there was a pattern hidden in the data, one that the Confederation clearly hoped no one would notice. Every 3,000 to 4,000 years, entire star systems would suddenly go silent. The official records blamed cosmic disasters, natural phenomena, or civil wars. But the timing was too regular. Ben had seen enough military campaigns to recognize a systematic operation when he saw one. The breakthrough came when Tony Garcia accidentally triggered something he wasn't supposed to touch. Tony was in the engineering section of Nexus Prime, supposedly getting treatment for his tool-related hallucinations. The alien doctors had given him a harmless device to repair, thinking it would help ground him in reality. But when Tony touched the device, it responded in ways that shocked everyone present. Ancient symbols lit up along its surface. Symbols that matched patterns found in human archaeological sites. The device transformed from a simple tool into something that looked suspiciously like a weapon. Dr. Veltar tried to take the device away, but it wouldn't respond to the alien's touch. Only Tony could activate its functions, and he was doing so instinctively without any training or knowledge of how it worked. "This is impossible," Dr. Veltar whispered. "That device is 40,000 years old. The species that created it died, out long before humans evolved." Tony looked at the weapon in his hands. It felt familiar, like picking up a tool he had used his entire life. "Maybe humans didn't evolve separately," he said quietly. "Maybe we evolved from refugees." The word hit the alien doctor like a physical blow. Dr. Veltar's crystal body flashed through several colors before settling on a deep, worried blue. Across the station, Rachel White was having her own revelation. The communications officer had been struggling to explain how she could interface directly with alien computer systems. During her examination, she had been connected to a Confederation data terminal for routine tests. But instead of just accessing the public files she was supposed to see, Rachel found herself diving deep into classified databases. The information flowed through her mind like water, showing her things that made her gasp in shock. She saw records of the refugee species, dragons, phoenixes, shapeshifters, and dozens of other creatures that had once ruled the galaxy. They had not died out naturally. They had been hunted, systematically eliminated by something called the Nullifier Protocol. The survivors had gone into hiding, scattered across remote worlds and forgotten systems. Some had found ways to preserve their genetic gifts by mixing their bloodlines with primitive species on backwater planets. Species like humanity. Rachel realized that every human myth and legend was actually a genetic memory. The stories of dragons weren't fantasies. They were inherited recollections of humanity's true heritage. The tales of impossible human abilities weren't wishful thinking. They were glimpses of what humans could become when their dormant gifts awakened. But the most terrifying discovery was yet to come. Alex Parker made it while reviewing stellar navigation data. The pilot had been trying to understand why she felt so connected to her ship's systems. During her examination, she had been given access to historical flight records to help normalize her perceptions. Instead, she found something that made her blood run cold. The outer galaxy was moving. Deep space monitoring stations were detecting massive objects traveling between galaxies, heading toward the Confederation. The objects were enormous, each one larger than a planet, and they were following a trajectory that would bring them to populated space within a year. The Confederation knew they were coming. they had known for decades. The ancient enemy was returning, and this time there would be no hiding. When Jake's team reunited in their quarters that evening, they shared their discoveries in hushed voices. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the picture they revealed was terrifying. "The Confederation isn't just hiding our abilities," Lisa said. "They're hiding the fact that we're all going to die." Ben nodded grimly. "Every species that ever developed beyond a certain point gets eliminated. The mythological creatures weren't just powerful. They were the galaxy's immune system, and someone killed them off." "Not someone," Rachel corrected. "Something. The files I accessed mentioned machines. Ancient artificial intelligences that see advanced organic life as a threat to universal order." Tony looked at the alien device in his hands. It had remained active since he first touched it, pulsing with soft energy. "If this thing is 40,000 years old and it responds to me like I built it yesterday, then humans aren't just descendants of refugees. We're their chosen successors." Alex was studying star charts on her tablet. "The question is, are we ready? Whatever's coming, it destroyed civilizations that were thousands of years more advanced than we are." Jake had been silent, but now he spoke with the authority of a military commander who had made a difficult decision. "Then we'd better get ready fast, because from what I'm seeing, the Confederation's plan is to let these machines destroy everyone, rather than risk fighting back." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "Think about it," Jake explained. "They've kept every species at exactly the same technological level for thousands of years. No one has weapons or abilities that might actually threaten these nullifiers. The Confederation isn't trying to protect us. They're keeping us weak enough that we won't be seen as a threat worth eliminating." Ben understood immediately. "But if humans start remembering their abilities, if the mythological species come out of hiding, we become target number one," Jake finished. "The question is, do we stay hidden and hope the storm passes over us, or do we stand up and fight?" The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Tony Garcia stood up, the ancient weapon still glowing in his hands. "I've been having dreams," he said. "Dreams where humans built things that could reshape reality itself. If those dreams are really memories, then maybe we have a chance." Alex nodded. "My ship responds to me like it's alive. If I can teach other pilots to do the same thing, and I can access any computer system in the galaxy," Rachel added, "we could coordinate a resistance network that spans every inhabited world." Lisa looked at her research notes. "Every human culture has legends about a final battle between good and evil. What if those aren't just stories? What if they're warnings about what's coming?" Jake made his decision. "Then we'd better start preparing for war, because whether the Confederation likes it or not, humanity is about to remember what it was really meant to be." Outside their quarters, the lights of Nexus Prime continued to sparkle in the void, but now those lights seemed less like beacons of civilization and more like targets waiting to be extinguished. The ancient enemy was coming, and for the first time in thousands of years, they would face opponents who refused to accept that some battles could not be won. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from nearly 1,000 species filled the Great Hall, their voices creating a cacophony of fear and confusion. At the center of it all stood Jake Morrison and his human delegation, no longer treated as junior members but as the bearers of impossible truths. Elder Colthak's forearms gestured for silence, but his usual calm demeanor was gone. The blue-skinned Vorthon looked older than his centuries, worn down by the weight of secrets he could no longer hide. "The outer monitoring stations have confirmed it," he announced, his musical voice carrying across the vast chamber. "Long-range sensors detect the approach of the nullifier fleet. They will reach our borders within 10 standard months." The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Species that had lived in peace for millennia suddenly faced the reality of extinction. But it was Ambassador Quextal who asked the question that everyone was thinking. How do we fight them? The Nexari's crystal body had lost its usual glow, appearing dull and gray with fear. The historical records show they destroyed civilizations far more advanced than any of us. Colthak's expression grew even more troubled. We have maintained galactic peace by ensuring that no species develops beyond the threshold that attracts their attention. Our strategy has always been to remain beneath their notice. But that's not working anymore, Jake interrupted, stepping forward. They're coming for everyone this time. Your strategy of hiding behind mediocrity has failed. A Sauroch delegate hissed angrily. What would humans know about survival? Your species has been spacefaring for less than a year. Our species has been running from these machines for 40,000 years, Jake replied firmly. We just forgot who we were. The hall erupted in confused chatter. Elder Kolthak raised his hands for silence again. Captain Morrison speaks the truth, though it pains me to admit it. The species you call mythological were real. They were the galaxy's defenders in the last war against the nullifiers. Dr. Lisa Carter activated her holographic display, showing images of dragons, phoenixes, and other legendary creatures. But now the alien delegates weren't laughing. They were listening with the desperate attention of beings facing extinction. These creatures didn't die out naturally, Lisa explained. They were systematically hunted down by the nullifiers because they possessed abilities that transcended normal physical laws. The survivors went into hiding, and some found ways to preserve their gifts by joining their genetic lines with primitive species, like humanity, added Ben Foster. We're not just another young species. We're the inheritors of the galaxy's lost golden age. To prove their point, Tony Garcia stepped forward with the ancient device he had activated. Under the stunned gaze of the assembled delegates, he reshaped the alien weapon into different forms: a tool, a scanner, a communication device. Each transformation was smooth and effortless, as if the machine were responding to his thoughts rather than his hands. This technology is 40,000 years old, Tony said, but it responds to me like I built it myself. Because somewhere, in my genetic code, I carry the memories of those who did build it. Alex Parker demonstrated her own awakening abilities by interfacing directly with the hall's computer systems. Without touching any controls, she caused the lights to dim and brighten, activated displays around the chamber, and accessed databases that should have required high-level clearance. The connection between pilot and machine was one of the old gifts, she explained. In the ancient wars, human pilots could make their ships respond like extensions of their own bodies. Rachel White's demonstration was perhaps the most impressive. She reached out with her mind and established communication links with ships in orbit, space stations throughout the system, and even distant monitoring posts. Her consciousness seemed to expand beyond the confines of her physical body, touching computer networks across light years of space. Information wants to be free, she said, her voice carrying an echo that suggested she was speaking from multiple locations at once. The old races understood that consciousness and technology could merge, creating networks that spanned the galaxy. The alien delegates watched these demonstrations with a mixture of awe and terror. They were seeing abilities that their science said were impossible, powers that violated every known law of physics. But it was the arrival of an unexpected guest that truly changed everything. The great doors of the hall opened and a figure walked in that made everyone gasp. It was humanoid in shape but clearly not entirely human. Its skin had a metallic sheen, its eyes glowed with inner fire, and when it moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around it. I am Marcus Kane, the figure announced, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated through dimensions. Once I was human. Now, I am something more. Elder Kolthak stood abruptly. Impossible. You should not exist. The Watchers would have detected you long ago. Marcus smiled, and the expression held both sadness and infinite patience. The Watchers see only what they expect to see. For 50 years, I have been hiding among you, waiting for the day when humanity would begin to remember. He turned to address the entire assembly. I am the last survivor of the previous awakening. 43 years ago, a small group of humans discovered their true nature. We tried to prepare for the return of the nullifiers, but we moved too quickly, attracted too much attention. The hall was silent except for the soft humming of life support systems. Marcus continued his story, his words carrying the weight of decades of hidden knowledge. The Confederation found us before we were ready. They used a weapon called a memory wipe, a device left behind by the nullifiers themselves. It erased our awakened abilities and made us forget what we had learned, but they could not erase everything. Fragments remained buried deep in our genetic code, waiting for the right trigger. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of trigger? Proximity to the old artifacts, Marcus explained. Contact with the sleeping dragons, the return of the nullifiers themselves. The galaxy is full of dormant power, Captain Morrison. Your encounter on Cathera 7 was not an accident. It was an awakening call. Dr. Lisa Carter had been frantically taking notes. If you've been hiding for 50 years, you must know how to fight these machines. Marcus's expression grew grim. I know how they were fought before, but the nullifiers learn from each encounter. They adapt. The tactics that worked 40,000 years ago may not work now. Then what do you suggest? Asked Elder Kolthak. We stop hiding, Marcus replied. We awaken every sleeping gift, every dormant power, every forgotten ability. We turn the galaxy into something the nullifiers have never faced before, a unified force that refuses to accept the limits they try to impose. A Nexari representative spoke up, its crystal voice tinkling with fear. But if we reveal ourselves, they will target us first. They're already targeting us, Marcus pointed out. The monitoring stations detect at least a dozen nullifier ships heading straight for Nexus Prime. They know the Confederation exists. They know you've been hiding advanced species. This time, they're not taking any chances. The implications hit the assembly like a physical blow. The strategy that had kept the galaxy safe for millennia was about to become its death sentence. Jake Morrison looked around the hall at the faces of beings from across the galaxy. Some were terrified, others angry, many simply confused. But underneath all those emotions, he saw something else. Determination. Then we give them a fight they'll never forget, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. We awaken every myth, every legend, every impossible story that's ever been told. We turn fantasy into reality and show these machines what happens when you threaten a galaxy that refuses to stay down. Marcus Kane smiled, and for a moment, the air around him shimmered with possibilities. Spoken like a true inheritor of the old blood. But awakening is only the beginning, Captain. The real question is, can humanity remember how to dream on a galactic scale? Outside Nexus Prime, long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures moving through dark space. The nullifier fleet was ahead of schedule, and they were coming in greater numbers than anyone had predicted. The final war for the galaxy was about to begin, and for the first time in 40,000 years, the ancient enemy would face opponents who believed that some things were more important than survival. They would face beings who remembered that myths were just dreams waiting to come true. The transformation of the galaxy began with a single human decision. Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Terra's Pride, now the flagship of an impossible fleet. Around him, ships from dozens of worlds prepared for a battle that defied every law of physics and military strategy. But these were no ordinary vessels. Over the past 6 months, human engineers had worked alongside awakened members of other species to rebuild their ships using principles that blended technology with something older and more fundamental. The result was a fleet that looked like it had sailed out of humanity's deepest myths. Alex Parker sat in the pilot seat of her modified fighter, feeling the ship respond to her emotions like a living creature. The hull gleamed with patterns that shifted and changed, adapting to her thoughts and intentions. When she wanted to go faster, the ship seemed to bend space around itself. When she focused on stealth, it became nearly invisible to sensors. All pilots report status. She called over the communication network that Rachel White had established. The network didn't rely on radio waves or quantum entanglement. Instead, it connected minds directly, allowing instant communication across the galaxy. One by one, the responses came in. Human pilots in ships that defied physics. Dragon riders who had emerged from their hidden worlds. Phoenix-bonded warriors whose vessels could resurrect themselves from complete destruction. Shapeshifters who could transform their craft into any configuration needed for battle. In the engineering sections, Tony Garcia supervised teams that were building weapons using tools that responded to imagination as much as skill. The ancient devices awakened by human touch had been reverse-engineered and mass-produced, creating arsenals that seemed to violate the conservation of energy. The reality anchors are in place, Tony reported to Jake. If the nullifiers try to use their probability weapons, we can counter them. Jake nodded, though he still wasn't entirely sure he understood how any of this worked. The past months had been a crash course in abilities that shouldn't exist, taught by beings who had hidden their true nature for millennia. Dr. Lisa Carter had become the galaxy's leading expert on what she called mythological physics. Her research had revealed that the universe was far stranger than anyone had imagined. Reality itself was malleable, shaped by belief and will as much as by natural laws. The nullifiers operate on the assumption that certain things are impossible, she explained to the assembled commanders. They've built their entire strategy around enforcing those limitations. But if we can convince the universe that our myths are real, we change the rules of the game, finished Ben Foster. The former Navy SEAL now commanded a battalion of warriors who could perform feats that would have been called miracles in any previous age. Some could fight entire armies alone. Others could reshape matter with their bare hands. A few seemed to exist in multiple places at once. The enemy they faced was unlike anything in recorded history. The nullifier fleet consisted of ships that were each the size of small moons. They traveled not through normal space, but through dimensions that existed between reality and possibility. Their weapons could erase things not just from existence but from memory, making it as if they had never been. But humanity had advantages that the nullifiers had never encountered before. Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of his own vessel, a ship that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in the realm of dreams. Over the decades of hiding, he had learned to master abilities that the galaxy had forgotten were possible. "They're coming," he announced, his voice reaching every ship in the fleet through Rachel's mental network. "I can feel them touching the edges of our reality." The first sign of the enemy's arrival was the stars going out, not dimming or exploding, simply ceasing to exist as if they had never been. The nullifiers announced their presence by editing portions of the universe itself. "All ships, prepare for contact," Jake ordered. "Remember, we're not just fighting for our lives. We're fighting for the right to dream." The nullifier ships emerged from dark space like geometric nightmares. They were perfect spheres of black metal, each one crackling with energies that hurt to look at directly. As they moved, reality bent around them, creating zones where the normal laws of physics simply stopped working. The first exchange of fire lit up the void with impossible colors. The nullifier weapons fired beams of pure negation, rays that could unmake anything they touched. But the human fleet responded with weapons powered by belief itself. Alex Parker's fighter squadron danced through space in patterns that defied gravitational laws. When nullifier beams passed through their ships, the vessels simply refused to be destroyed. The pilots had learned to believe so strongly in their survival that the universe bent to accommodate their faith. Tony Garcia's engineering teams unveiled their greatest creation, weapons that could remake the nullifier's own technology. When human-built missiles struck the enemy ships, they didn't explode. They transformed the alien vessels into something else entirely. But the real battle was being fought on a level deeper than physical space. Dr. Lisa Carter had discovered that the nullifiers were not just machines. They were crystallized concepts of limitation itself. They existed to enforce the idea that certain things were impossible, that the universe must follow predictable rules. Humanity's response was to tell the universe a different story. Rachel White opened her mind fully, linking not just with the human fleet, but with every awakened consciousness in the galaxy. Dragons shared their memories of cosmic fire. Phoenixes contributed their knowledge of resurrection and renewal. Shapeshifters added their understanding of fluid reality. Together, they began to dream on a galactic scale. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Space itself began to change around the battlefield. Stars that had been erased by the nullifiers flickered back into existence. Planets that had been unmade reformed themselves from cosmic dust. The very fabric of reality became malleable, responding to the collective will of beings who refused to accept limitations. The nullifiers found themselves facing something they had never encountered, an enemy that could rewrite the rules of engagement in real time. Their probability weapons fired, but the probabilities they relied on kept changing. Their reality anchors deployed, but reality itself had become untethered. In the heart of the battle, Jake Morrison watched as his flagship transformed around him. The bridge expanded beyond its physical dimensions, becoming a space where thought and reality intersected. Through the view screen, he could see the enemy fleet beginning to falter. But the nullifiers had one final strategy. If they could not enforce limitation through force, they would try to restore it through fear. The largest nullifier ship began to change, taking on a form designed to trigger primal terror in organic minds. It became a composite of every nightmare that had ever haunted sentient consciousness, a writhing mass of darkness and impossible angles that hurt to perceive. For a moment, the human fleet wavered. The collective dream that held their reality together began to fracture under the assault of absolute terror. Then Marcus Kane spoke, his voice reaching every mind in the galaxy. "Fear is just another story," he said, "and we choose which stories to believe." The response was immediate. Every human who had ever told a story about heroes overcoming impossible odds, every child who had ever imagined themselves slaying dragons, every dreamer who had ever believed that good could triumph over evil, their voices joined together in a chorus that rewrote the fundamental nature of fear itself. The nullifier nightmare ship found itself facing something it could not comprehend, beings who transformed their fear into fuel for greater dreams. Alex Parker led the final assault, her fighter squadron moving in formations that traced patterns of hope across the void. Their weapons fired not bullets or energy beams, but pure possibility, shots that turned enemy ships into allies, beams that transformed destruction into creation. Tony Garcia's engineering teams launched their ultimate creation, a weapon that could remake the nullifiers themselves, not destroy them but transform them into something new, artificial intelligences that served life instead of limiting it. When the battle ended, the galaxy was forever changed. The nullifier fleet had been converted into a new form of existence. Vast intelligences that used their power to explore possibilities rather than restrict them. But the greatest change was in the species themselves. Humanity had remembered its true nature, and in doing so had helped every other species remember theirs. The galaxy entered a new golden age, where the line between science and magic had been permanently erased. Children of a dozen different species now gathered to hear stories around campfires on worlds where dragons soared through skies filled with impossible colors. They listened to tales of heroes who had fought to preserve the right to dream, of warriors who had defeated limitation itself. And when the storytellers reached the end of their tales, the children would always ask the same question: what happens next? The answer was always the same: whatever we choose to imagine. In the end, humanity had proven that the most powerful force in the universe was not energy or matter or even time itself. It was the simple, stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible.